So I love this theme. And to be completely transparent with you all, I am looking forward to experiencing that rest this week. It was several years ago, probably like 13 years ago or so, that I was ministering in this small little town in southeast Kansas. And I found myself just in this kind of dark place, I guess. I mean, my heart felt cold, and I guess you could probably describe it best by just saying I was tired. And so I was talking to a couple of my mentors about what I was going through, and they encouraged me to reach out to a counselor. And at first I kind of pushed back, I don't need to talk to a counselor. I do counseling for people. I don't talk to counselors. I was a little bit prideful and arrogant. But eventually I ended up listening to my mentors, and I reached out to this guy. And I remember the day that the appointment finally came, and I was walking into his office, and in my mind, I know that nobody keeps score whenever you go see a counselor, but in my mind, I was like, I'm going to win this appointment, I'm going to impress this guy. And so I start talking, and I think that I am absolutely nailing it. I'm saying all the right things, and I'm using the perfect tone. If I'm being completely honest with you, there was probably a part of me that was sooner or later this counselor's going to say, okay, Andy, I need you to stop. Why are you coming here to talk to me? Instead, can we switch seats, and can I talk to you about all of my deepest, darkest problems, and will you help me? I thought I was doing so good, and then I finally shut up, and the counselor, he looked at me, and this is what he said. He said, Andy, you have dysfunctional thinking patterns. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And it's well, if he would have known everything that was going on in your head, I would have known exactly what he meant, He said, you have dysfunctional thinking patterns. It's like your brain is broken. It's like you don't think about things properly. And I believe that this is so important for us today because the way that we think will shape our lives. Our thoughts will shape the way that we view the world. Our thoughts will shape the way that we view our friends. They will shape the way that we view people that we don't know. They will shape the way that we view people that we do know, but we don't like. Our thoughts will shape the way that the attitudes that we have towards things like family or school or work ethic, or the effort that we're willing to put into things, how coachable we are. Are you somebody who is able to be corrected, or are you somebody who always just has to be right? Because whenever it all comes down to it, there is no one who talks to you more than you talk to you. Most of us have just learned to talk to ourselves without moving our mouths so people don't think that we're crazy. But it's in all these silent and private conversations that you have with you that you develop the confidence that God is who God claims to be. Or you don't. It's in all these private conversations that you remember God's grace or you don't. It's in these private conversations that you remember God's presence or you don't, that you remember His promises or you don't. And this week, I hope that we can help each other think about God. I hope that as this week goes on, that we can learn how to think more rightly about God, because I know that I desperately want for all of us to see God for who God really is. And I believe that Psalm 23 is the perfect place for us to kind of just hang out for a bit to shape the way that we think about God. Psalm 23 is arguably the most famous psalm in all the psalms. I remember whenever I was a kid, I grew up in a little Baptist church, and they always handed out these tiny little Bibles, and they were just the New Testament, but whenever they would hand you a New Testament, it always would also include Psalm 23. There's a good chance that some of you are familiar with Psalm 23. Maybe you've heard it at a funeral. Maybe your parents read it to you whenever you were growing up. Maybe some of you are just vaguely familiar with it, you remember the 90s rap song, Gangsta's Paradise, and you heard Coolio rapping about, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. Yeah, you guys know that song, that's good. Maybe you're familiar with it through that. Maybe some of you are being introduced to it for the very first time this week. But regardless of how familiar you are with this psalm, my hope is that we spend time in it each day this week, that it will sink deeper and deeper into the depths of our souls, changing the way that we see God, changing the way that we think about God, and changing the way that we respond to God. As Aaron said, each day we'll introduce to you, each morning we'll introduce to you our word for the day. And today our word is posture. Everybody say posture. And what I want you to really think about in my time with you is your heart posture. Because this is the way this is the perfect way for us to begin our time together. As you sit here today, what is your posture towards Jesus? Are you following Jesus? Is Jesus the king of your life? Is he the Lord of your life? Is he the rule maker in your life? Or are you distracted? Are there all kinds of things that are going on at home that's where your attention is? And as much as you want to be able to really just dive into what it is that God's doing in this place, it's like part of you is still back at home. Are you in the middle of tragedy or some sort of heartache? Are there relationship problems? Are there family problems? Are you apathetic? Maybe you hear people talk about the goodness of God and you're just like, I don't see it. And even if I did, I don't think that I would care. And so as we begin our time together this week, I would love to encourage you to consider your posture. And with that said, let's take a look at Psalm 23. This is what it says. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. We will spend time throughout this week kind of looking into the background of this psalm, but here's what I want you to know right now. Psalm 23 is a psalm that was written by King David. And David was a man who experienced many highs in his life, and he experienced many lows in his life. But through it all, David was a man who was known as the man after God's own heart. And in these short 6 verses, David, he gives us this beautiful picture of who this God is that he strives for and that he longs for and that he yearns to know. And I'm excited to walk through this psalm with you. But today, as we get started, we're going to just focus in on the first 3 verses. So you guys ready to go? You guys ready to kind of just do this here for a few minutes? None of you? Sweet. Make sure you're awake. There we go. Verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd. David begins this psalm with this powerful declaration. The Lord is my shepherd. And honestly, I think that we could stop there for the day. We're not going to, but we could stop right there because there's not a more important question that we will ask you today than this. Is the Lord your shepherd? Is the Lord my shepherd? But I don't want you to miss this because you do have a shepherd. You are following someone. You are being led by someone or something. The question is, who or what are you following? Being a shepherd was not an easy job. It was not a prestigious job. It certainly wasn't a job for a king. It was a dirty job. It was a thankless job, but it was a job that seemed to hold a special place in God's heart. And it was a job that David was personally acquainted with. Essentially, the job of the shepherd was to get to know his sheep. It was to feed his sheep, to water his sheep, to protect the sheep from themselves and from predators on the outside. The job of the shepherd was to provide for his sheep. And David says, because the Lord is my shepherd, because the Lord, the God of the universe, is my protector and my provider, because I am known by him, he says, I lack nothing. Because of that reason, I have everything I need. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. And And the thought of a sheep actually lying down in green pastures, it would have been so hard for any shepherd to even begin to comprehend. We know this, that sheep are not the brightest, they're not the bravest, which is why the sheep need a shepherd to take care of them. There's stories of sheep that they would just put their head down and they would start eating the grass, and then they would end up looking up and they were like 3 miles away from where they were supposed to be, and they had no earthly idea how to get back. That's kind of the sheep that we're talking about here, but the only way that you could ever expect a sheep to lie down in a green pasture, listen, is if that sheep was fully satisfied and completely safe. Not to mention that green pastures were not the most common scenery in David's part of the world, but David is making the point that that's how good your good shepherd is. And David says that he leads him besides these quiet waters, these peaceful waters, these still waters, and it's there that he refreshes my soul. He continues to say that he guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. If you have a physical Bible, I would encourage you to underline those last 4 words, for his name's sake. Because as we go through the rest of this psalm, I want you to continually go back to this place in the psalm. Everything that we're going to talk about is for his name's sake. And so this good shepherd, he sought out the path and he's worn it in. This wasn't a paved path. This wasn't a machine-made path. This was a path that was a worn path. Because the good shepherd, he knows the best way to go, and David's saying that he leads me on it. So this shepherd, he guides and he provides and he protects. And it's in him that we find rest and we find refreshment. And I don't know about you, but I am longing for that as we come into this week. I am longing for the rest and the refreshment that only the good shepherd can provide. And so it brings up this question that I want us to look at here just for a couple more minutes. Who is this good shepherd? We know that he's good, but who is this shepherd that David is telling us about here? We see in verse 1 that he says that it's the Lord, right? But if you have a physical Bible, if you look at that, you'll see that the word Lord does not look like the word Lord in other places, because the word Lord here is capitalized in your English translations. That's not by accident. It's because David is using a different word for Lord than what is generally used in the Hebrew Scriptures. Generally, you get this word Adonai for the word Lord, but here David uses a different word. He uses a name for God. He uses Yahweh. And Yahweh literally means this. It's one of the most famous names for God, and what it means is, I am. Like I am, I always is. I know that sounds weird to our grammar, but I always is, always will be. I am sufficient within, he is sufficient within himself. He has no beginning and he has no end. And this is why he can be all that we need. There is nothing in this world that I would love more than to be all that some people could need. I wish I could be all that my family needed. I wish I could be all that my church needed. I wish I could be all that my kids needed. I wish I could be all for anybody, but I can't even be all that I need. But the I am, Yahweh, is able to be all that we need. The name I am, it goes back to Exodus chapter 3, and it's there that you find Moses. And he comes upon this burning bush, and God begins to speak to him out of this bush that's on fire, but it's not like burning up. It's kind of this crazy thing. And he ends up telling Moses that he's going to go and do something miraculous for God's people. And Moses, he listens to what it is that God's saying to him. And he ends up asking this question. He's like, yeah, but who do I tell people sent me? You know, like if people say, why are you coming to us? Why are you doing? Who am I supposed to say sent me? Who do I say that you are? And God responded by saying, I am that I am. Receive who I am and trust me. Then you fast forward to John's gospel, and in his telling of Jesus' life, John's gospel, he shares with us these statements that Jesus used, where Jesus said, I am. He said, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate. I am the resurrection and life. I am the way, the truth, and life. I am the vine. But then there in John chapter 10, Jesus is using this imagery of sheep and a shepherd. And he begins by saying, I am the gate. And all that enter through me will be saved. But then he says this, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I come that you may have life and have it to the full. Because I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Psalm 23, as we go through it, Psalm 23 is all about Jesus. Jesus is the good shepherd in whom we lack nothing, in whom we have everything we need. Therefore, in Jesus, we are satisfied and at peace. Jesus is the living water who refreshes our soul and who quenches our thirst. He is the one who is the way, who shows us the way to live the life that he desires for us to live for the glory of his name, for his name's sake. Now, I'm guessing that for some of you, that description does not necessarily line up with the realities that you're facing today. You are not satisfied here today. You are not at peace here today. You are not refreshed as you sit here today. But if I may I encourage you, don't give up. Please lean in. And I pray that you will see God for who he really is this week. But as we get started this morning, the number one question I want to ask you and the thing I want to leave you with today, who is your shepherd?